Hello, welcome to this week's episode of the EFX Loop. I am your host, Jay Byrne. We're going to do something interesting this week. I have actually completely ripped my pedal board apart here so I can talk about pedals. So we can talk about what are good pedals to have, what pedals work well with the amp that I'm using, which is the Orange Super Crush 100, which is running through a 212 cabinet with a Waza Greenback and a Vintage 30. It's 100 watts. Well, the cabinet itself is, I think, 120 watts. I think. Yeah, I think it is, because it's double. It's 60 times 2, so it's 120. But so I've got all this stuff here. This is my pedal board. This is everything that's on the pedal board. It's a complete thing right now, which has taken me a while to get all these pieces together. That's why I've been kind of waiting to make this video. But I really wanted to talk about just the essentials that you kind of need to make a decent pedal board, and what you could use, depending on the type of amp that you have, to put together a small board of, I don't know, stuff. But I've curated this stuff pretty well. I've spent quite a long time going through all these different pedals and finding what I like and what works for me. It doesn't work for everybody, but it'll work for a good amount of people, that are similar to me in the way that they play and the type of equipment that they have. So yeah, so let's get going on this. This is going to be an interesting one. So sometimes this can look a bit daunting. It can look a little bit crazy and kind of daunting to some people, and it almost makes people not want to do it because it's just too much stuff. Like, okay, I've got 6 pedals here and I have a true bypass switcher, all right? Why would I need a true bypass switcher with 6 pedals? Well, because most people would say 6 pedals isn't a lot. I mean, wouldn't you want like a giant bypass switcher if you had more than 6 pedals? Well, it's about maintaining the integrity of the tone from the amp. Because straight into the amp sounds great, and I play clean a lot. But you start adding more pedals, even just 6 pedals, okay? And it really dulls down the sound. It muddies it up, and it makes a mess out of the tone. This is straight into my amp. The only thing that's going through this amp right now is this digital delay in the EFX Loop, but it's not on. This is just the amp with a little bit of reverb, okay? So this is my straight in. I'm on the middle pickup on my Telecaster. It's single coils, showing you single coils. This is straight in to the amp. This is my tone. That's straight into the amp, okay? This is running through the switcher, 4 Boss pedals, actually, yeah, the digital delay, which is still in the loop, the 3 Boss pedals, which are going in the front of the amp, and an MXR Phase 95, okay? And I am using a buffer to kind of keep my signal integrity. But this is the raw tone of that. So, in order to maintain as close to possible, now it's not perfect, it's never going to be perfect, but in order to maintain as close to possible your original tone of plugging your guitar straight into the amp, you need to be running through some kind of switching unit. Like, which is this true bypass switcher. This switcher that I got right here is from a company called American Loopers, okay? I found them online, I heard about them. They're actually relatively inexpensive. This is just under $200 for a 6-foot switch true bypass looper. You can run 6 loops, 6 pedals into this looper, and you can control them from these individual foot switches. I'm actually not using the first and the last one right now, but if I wanted to, I could add 2 more pedals to it, and 2 more pedals wouldn't even degrade my signal tone any, because they're running through the looper. It would sound exactly the same as it sounds running through this particular looper. So yeah, this is if that's what you're looking for, you don't need any of these crazy programmable loopers if you're dealing with like 5 or 6 pedals. All you really need is a true bypass looper, and you can find them relatively inexpensive. There are different companies that make them. So yeah, that's that. You're also going to want some sort of power supply, okay? You can use a one-spot daisy chain, which is a plug that goes into a wall and plugs into other plugs and a plug. You can use that if you want to. You're probably going to get a decent amount of noise. You're gonna hear a lot of like hum and buzz, and more than usual, because you're going to get that with pedals anyway. But you're going to hear a decent amount of noise unless you're using an actual isolated power supply. This is a Spot Pro CS6, relatively inexpensive. It's this will run you probably about 150 bucks around there. So it's not the cheapest power supply that you can buy. Actually, I think it's more like $130-ish. But it works. These work really well. I've had multiples of these in the past. I have different ones. I've had a bigger one. I've had smaller ones. And I find that these work actually very well. So, I don't know. My recommendation, Truetone one spot. They work good. I also had a Fender engine room. I thought that one was okay, although I felt the jacks felt kind of cheap on that one. They feel more sturdy on these Truetone ones. So that's my own personal opinion, but that's how that works, okay? My board that I use is this NUX Bumblebee board, which I think is actually kind of cool. If you're putting together a small board, it's not bad. It's not the greatest for cable management because it doesn't really have many places where you can hide your cables. I'm sure you could use zip ties and you could tighten it up and stuff like that as well. As far as the cables are concerned, these are the power cables that come with the one spot. It comes with 6 power cables, which if you're powering 6 pedals is more than enough. You need to power this as well. You don't have to. This will work without the power running through it, but the only thing is you won't get the lights coming on. The LEDs won't come on. So I power this just using a regular pedal board power supply because it's 9 volts. It's just so that I can see the lights when I click a foot switch on. But you actually don't have to. If you don't care about that, then you actually don't have to plug it in. You could not do it. That is an extra thing. I don't have enough slots on my my one spot, so that has to go separately from that. All right. I spent a good amount of time working on this. Now, patch cables, okay, can drive you freaking crazy. I bought cheapo Amazon patch cables. It was this company called Freeleaf, all right, off of Amazon, and they were awful. They sucked they sucked my tone of my guitar so bad. It made my guitar sound muddy and horrible. So I actually returned those, and I bought these instead. They're a little bit more expensive. It's this company called Pig Hog, and they're actually a really cool company, and because they sell, at least as far as I'm concerned, very durable guitar cables and patch cables and mic cords and whatnot. They're very durable, they're well made, and they work. They sound pretty good. I have no way to measure the capacitance of these. Capacitance is how you measure whether it's going to suck your tone, it's going to be bright, it's going to be dark. I can say, in comparison to the Ernie Ball patch cables, because I do have an Ernie Ball one that I use one of them here, these are really good. And these are relatively low capacitance. It's like 40 picofarads or something. I don't really understand all that stuff. All I know is these don't color my tone much, these Ernie Ball ones, okay? These apparently are comparable to the Ernie Ball ones. So I got these for the fact that they were low profile, because the back of this switcher, as you can see, everything's kind of crammed together, so it's a little hard to get to some stuff on the back of that switcher. So you need to have cables that can, you know, not take up space, and they're easier to use, because unfortunately the ones with the pancake ends, the MXR ones and whatnot, which are actually good cables, and even these, for example, if you could get longer versions of these Ernie Balls, these would probably work as well. But these can get a little pricey. These are actually not bad. You can get 4 of these for around 16 or 17 bucks on Amazon, and that's what I did. I ended up with 8 because it's all I actually need right now is 8. So that's what I'm using, and that's what I have. But yeah, patch cables, man, these can get really expensive, and you can go down the rabbit hole of buying crazy expensive patch cables, but you don't have to. It's not necessary. You really don't have to do that. These Pig Hog ones are cool. The Ernie Ball ones are cool. Anything within the range of price and quality of these type of patch cables, I mean, they're good enough. They work, I think, as good as you're going to get. I mean, you can go out and buy expensive patch cables. You can make your own solderless. A lot of people do that, and I mean, that's sure, go right ahead. But honestly, I don't think you really need to go down that rabbit hole, because you can just buy pre-made soldered cables. If you're just building a board for yourself at the house, and you don't care if the cable management isn't the best, because the cable management is not the greatest, but it's decent. Okay, so now let's get into what kind of pedals, like, you know, you could have for, like, say, like a beginner board or whatnot. If you were making a first-time board and you've never really messed around with pedals, I would suggest, very much so, if you're using the distortion from your amp for most of your distortion needs, but you just want a little bit more, you need some sort of overdrive pedal. If you're running through a clean channel, you would actually want to use a distortion pedal. Something along the likes of like a JHS Angry Charlie, or there's a whole bunch of different ones. There's a D&M drive from the guys that do that pedal show, Dan and Mick. You could do that. You could essentially get this and a regular TS9 tube screamer, stack them together, and create a pretty good drive tone on an actual clean channel. But I'm using the distortion in my orange Super Crush 100 head. I like the distortion in the amp. I just want to boost it a little bit. This Super Overdrive, the SD one, this is not the fancy Waza one, because I couldn't get one when I went to go buy one, because when they just didn't have one at the store and I was impatient. And plus, this is a lot cheaper. You can get these for like 60, 70, used you can get them for like 50 bucks. But if you're buying new, you're going to pay about 70 bucks for this, and it's perfect. This freaking pedal is perfect for just boosting a Marshall-y style distortion channel. It works great with the orange, because the orange can get a little woofy, and this will brighten that up, and it tightens the low end, and it sounds really good. So that you want an overdrive. All right. This is my distortion channel straight up. This is just the amp right now. No pedals on, nothing, but so I think that sounds really cool. Actually, like, it's just a good sound in general to work off of, because then what you can do, if you want to give it a little bit more grit, just kind of bring the drive up just a little bit, and I can use my Super Overdrive for this. Then I get I'll show the SD1 after, but actually what's interesting about the SD1 is if you want to bring the level down and kick up the drive, you can run it through the clean channel, and you can get what to me sounds like a pretty reasonable. What's really cool is if you bring down the actual reverb on this, and this digital delay, which is awesome, the DD3T, which I really love this delay. I'm going to talk more about it in the other section of the video. Bring it down. You can get this like weird, like double tracked effect. Try it on the bridge. using the SD1, the Boss SD1, directly into the clean channel. Now, at the head of your chain, you're going to need a tuner probably, and honestly, I got to tell you, you could get a Boss tuner. They have a Wazacraft one. It's a little expensive. It's 160 so bucks. You can get that. These Polytunes are really good. I really like these tuners. They work well. They're accurate. They're easy to see. Plus, they have a built-in buffer. Okay. The buffer that's built into this is a buffer that's sold separately that you can get, that you can use at the head or at the end of your pedal board to sweeten up your signal. Because what happens is all this cable capacitance basically will dull your signal. You'll lose your high end and whatnot. So what you want to do is you want to get something that has a buffer and put that right in the head of your chain, right the first thing. Tuner is perfect because most people put a tuner right in the front. Now if you're running a wah or a fuzz, you might need to run the wah or the fuzz before the buffer, so it would have to go before the tuner. That gets tricky, but we're not really focusing on that right now. We're focusing on a very basic board. So yeah, you got your tuner, you got your overdrive. Now this is for like a super basic first timer board, all right? You're probably going to want some sort of delay or something, some kind of modulation effect, all right? These are relatively inexpensive. They cost about $140-ish, I think, around there. This is a Boss DD3T digital delay. I love this pedal. I've been going down the delay rabbit hole for a while. I had the fancy Boss one. I had the DD8, which is kind of like a fancier version of this. This pedal is great. It does everything you want a delay pedal to do, unless you're getting crazy and doing like shoegaze music, which you can do some of that with it. It's only got a handful of settings. It's very basic. You can hold down the foot for tap tempo, because that's what the T stands for on the DD3. The old versions are just the DD3. DD3T has tap tempo. You can set a tap tempo. You can set your delay tempo. And yeah, you can get your typical, you know, metally kind of like longer delay. You can get an edge sound delay. It's got three settings and a looper, which is a very short loop. It's more just for like holding an extra note and doing like cool effects and stuff. Plus it does do the funky stuff, like when you start messing with the knobs, you get those crazy sounds. The spaceship noises that you can get out of a delay, you can get out of this, because even though it's digital, for whatever reason, it does it. But this delay pedal's awesome. Now, I always like to have a little bit of slap back delay. So using the digital delay, the DD3T, right here. So you get that. Kind of an edge thing going on there. And it sounds good. Put some reverb on that. But you can do some really cool stuff with, say, like, put your phaser on, okay? Really cool with this digital delay. You can get like that that short kind of 80s delay. Give me a second here. Put it on the 800 milliseconds here. Get that thing going on. Then you can put your chorus on here in your SD1. So we've covered, that's the basics right there. I mean, you can have an overdrive, a delay, and a tuner. And that, you can have, that could be your board, and that's perfect. And if you're running that, you don't need a switcher. You could run like 2 or 3 pedals and you would be fine. I've noticed that once you get more than like 4 or 5 pedals, that's when you start to notice the tone suckage, where your guitar starts to sound, it loses its brightness, it doesn't sound as good. Personally, for me, I'm a big fan of modulation. And there are certain modulations that I really like. I love chorus. I've always liked using a chorus pedal. I have found that this Boss CH1 is an awesome kind of do-it-all chorus. It sounds nice before a distortion, so you can get that 80s thing with the chorus before I put it in the front of my amp before my distortion. You can put it in the loop and it would sound fine as well. It's a little brighter and a little more articulate if you put it in the loop, but I like the way it sounds in front of the amp. And if you're playing clean, it sounds pretty much the same in the loop as it does in front of the amp. On the clean channel of that Orange Super Crush, which is actually a pretty good clean channel, I love this pedal. The Super Chorus is great. You could get a CE2 Waza, you could get the Dimension Chorus, there's a chorus ensemble. They kind of do similar things. You can get boutique ones that are all trying basically to be this, to be the Boss. All the boutique ones are trying to do is take the Boss pedal and, you know, and kind of add to it. There's MXR Analog Chorus, which is actually pretty good. I find that does suck a lot of tone. This one can darken your tone a little bit, but generally it's pretty transparent. And you can set it so that like it just adds a nice little shimmer, like a chorus shimmer to your sound. And it's not super heavy. But if you want to modulate it, you can crank up the rate and you can get that heavier, thicker with the rate and the depth modulation. It doesn't go as thick as some of the other Boss pedals, but I think this pedal, it works really well for what it is, I think. Now this is chorus, with using my chorus pedal. Get a very 80s kind of like heavy metal thing going on here. It's become my favorite chorus. I mean, would I want to have some different choruses? Maybe. I kind of want to get a, what do they call it? The Dimension chorus. I like the Dimension chorus. But I can achieve a lot of those effects with the things I have here. I love phaser. I love phaser. A phase 90 is awesome. If you try to do that Eddie Van Halen thing with the phaser, you put it before your distortion in the chain. And it's great. It works perfectly for that. And phaser is one of my favorite effects, and I just love playing with phaser. So this Phase 95 from MXR is awesome because it basically gives you like every flavor of phaser that MXR made, with the Phase 90 and it's a Phase 45, it's a Phase 90. They call it a Phase 95, but it's a Phase 45 and a Phase 90. You've got the script and the regular version, because they had different logos and they sounded different. And you've got your 45 and your 90, basically. If you can't find the phase sound that you're looking for on this phaser, I honestly don't know what you're looking for. I really like this. I've had this pedal multiple times, and it works really well for me. If you're looking for a phaser, this is rock solid. It's not ridiculously expensive. as 120 bucks or so. Not bad at all. If you can leave it on like that, if you add your phaser, let's just bring the phase down just a little bit, then you can do stuff like this is my priciest pedal on my board, and I love vibrato. I just like messing with the vibrato effect. You can do a lot of cool things with vibrato. I never thought I liked vibrato, but you can do a lot of cool things with vibrato. Really, you can get different vibratos, like boutique labels put them out. This will run you about 160, 170 bucks. But this is the Wazacraft, the VB2W vibrato. This is a reissue of the Boss vibrato, the VB2, from the 80s. It was a pedal that came out, actually, was it about the 80s? I think this pedal came out late 80s, early 90s or something like that. I can't remember exactly when. But it was out, it might have been earlier in the 80s than that. But then it was kind of discontinued by Boss, and you couldn't get them anymore. And the regular vibrato VB2s go for good money. But this thing is virtually identical to the original. Plus it gives you a custom mode. Like all these Waza pedals give you a separate mode, which is kind of like a tweaked mode. It's a new version of it. It's a heavier, thicker, more syrupy sound. But this thing is awesome. This pedal is great. Let's talk about signal chain here. If you're putting the pedal board together, all right? I'm not gonna assemble this whole thing, but I will actually kind of demonstrate some signal chain here. I'll leave this like this, I guess, so the camera can see it a little bit better. Kind of working backwards, but for me, obviously, I would put my my switcher. Most people will put their switcher, you know, on the bottom because you want to be able to get to it. You could put it on the top too. I mean, if you don't mind reaching over it to get. But you got to remember that generally speaking, most of your pedals that you're going to access are going to be connected to the switcher. So all you need to do is, you know, use the switcher basically. The tuner would go in the front. So I'd have my tuner up front, and guitar goes into tuner, goes into the input of the switcher. Okay. So you got that. And then the pedals that are in the switcher, okay? How I had it set up, you got to kind of go with, you got to kind of do things in the order that makes sense for pedals. This is before this. I'm using the buffer to kind of boost the signal that's going through this because this is true bypass. So this is working as a buffer for the pedals that are in here so that when it gets out to my amp, because this will go through here, this goes straight out to the front of my amp, the switcher. Because the pedals that are in the switcher go straight out to the front of the amp, okay? Now, you want to put them in the order that you want them to be in, obviously, but you want your distortion to be last in the chain, okay? So for me personally, and this is boosting the front end of an already distorted amp. You can also use this into a clean channel and get a pretty good distortion out of it. So you got the super overdrive, that's the last in the chain, all right? You want your modulations, I personally like to put modulation before distortion. Because if you want to run it with distortion, it sounds better. If you're just running clean, you can put all your modulations in the effects loop of your amp if it has one. If you're running a Fender style amp that's just, you know, straight through the front, you just want to, you know, you can put your modulations wherever you want in the chain, whatever sounds best to you. I always put my phaser first in the chain. Sounds best to me first in the chain, okay? Then I would put my chorus pedal after the phaser, because this is all just modulations, okay? Then I have another modulation, which is my vibrato. I put this in the front of the amp as well. I like it before the distortion. It works best for me before the distortion, although these two pedals, the chorus and the vibrato, can work in the loop fine. You can put them in the loop and they work fine. Phaser does a very specific thing in the loop. It doesn't sound as good in the loop, and it's very heavily affected. So if you want your phaser to be heavily affecting your tone, you can put it in the loop. But if you want it to just kind of like blend into your guitar tone with your distortion or whatnot, then you would want that in the front before your overdrives, your distortion, whatever you're using, okay? This digital delay is the only thing that I put in the loop. So I put this down on the bottom of my board here, and that's connected straight into my effects loop. It's not going through the switcher because I don't want, I tried doing it through the switcher, and you can run everything through the switcher, but then you start getting into like 4-cable method in a sense. If you're not familiar with that, you can go look it up, but it's just using more cables so that you can run everything separately in the front and into the loop that's all controlled by this. And to my ears, that tends to suck a little bit more of the tone. It tends to be clearer and a little more defined, the sound, if I just run my delay straight into the loop. Because the effects loop on the Orange Super Crush 100, which is the amp that I'm using, it's buffered. So in and out. So it's a fully buffered effects loop. This has a buffer in it as well, so it's not even, but it keeps your signal pretty clean when you're running through the effects loop, unless you're putting a ton of crap in there. Power supply goes on the bottom underneath. So I stick my power supply underneath and I wire it that way, and there it is. That's my pedal board. So this is in the loop. These 4 pedals are in the switcher, which are going into the front of my amp, and this is where the guitar plugs in and it goes right into the input here. Guitar into this, runs directly into the looper. These pedals are in the looper. This goes straight out to the front end of my amp. Then the digital delay pedal is send and return into my effects loop on the amp. And after much testing, I've done a lot of testing and tried it many different ways, I've found that for me, that gives me the most satisfactory tone. That sounds like my amp, it doesn't kill my amp's tone, and it's a good sound. It sounds good to me. And these particular pedals work well for me. And I've got 2 extra loops here. I don't have a lot of room on this board, but if I had a bigger board, I've got 2 extra loops. I can add 2 more pedals into the front of this amp without affecting the tone of the amp at all, because I'm running through the true bypass looper. So what it sounds like this is what it's going to sound like if I added 2 more pedals into it. But anyway, that's it. I'm Jay Byrne. This has been the Effects Loop. I hope you got something out of this. Like, subscribe, leave a comment. The comments help, and the liking helps a lot with the algorithm on YouTube. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. See you next time.